What's popping, y'all? So today we're gonna be talking about a story of a 22-year-old man out of North Dakota who had to get a double lung surgery, and many are thinking it was due to vaping. A 22-year-old man received a double lung transplant earlier this month after being on life support for 70 days. Golly, that's more than 2 months. Jackson Allard, a North Dakota resident, went to the emergency room for a stomach ache in October, but was instead admitted to the hospital because his lung levels had dipped too low. Doctors in North Dakota diagnosed Allard with parainfluenza, a virus that can cause respiratory infections, which spiraled into pneumonia, then acute respiratory distress syndrome, a life-threatening injury caused by fluid buildup in the lungs, or kind of like edema. Albert said that Allard had used e-cigarettes since he was 16 or 17, but recently started vaping more heavily. He had no idea how bad it was for him. The day before he was intubated, I had no idea I could get this sick. Basically what he said. Scientists still don't fully understand the association between vaping and lung disease, so it's unclear what role vaping may have played in Allard's case. Some studies suggest that using e-cigarettes could make people more susceptible to respiratory tract infections. We'll look at that research later. But Dr. Brian Kelly, medical director of Massachusetts General Hospital Lung Transplantation Program, said studies involving animals and human cells have shown that e-cigarettes used and can damage blood vessels and cells that line the lungs, the lining of the lungs. Basically, I could definitely tell you that it's a lot more dangerous to like smoke an e-cigarette because it comes with an added harms that I'll get into a lot more later. Forrest said that Allard was the longest patient that M Health Fairview had kept on the ECMO machine. And to be considered for a transplant, Allard needed to come off sedation and be able to walk. By the end of last year, he was struggling to survive. Doctors had to replace parts of his ECMO device, twice due to blood clots forming, which definitely could have been fatal. As well as then on December 12th, he went into cardiac arrest and had to be resuscitated. Golly. By the end of the month, Allard had improved and was able to stand and take a few steps. All of a sudden it just turned around like day and night. That's a miracle for you. But on New Year's Eve, Forrest got the call that doctors had located a new pair of lungs for his son. Allard received a transplant the next day. By January 5th, he was no longer on life support, so the transplant was seeming to be a success. And so before we get into the research, let's talk about what vaping is. Vaping is when you use a handheld electronic device to breathe a mist, a vapor, into your lungs. An e-cigarette, a vape pen, or other electronic nicotine delivery system heats a liquid of nicotine, flavoring, propylene glycol, and other additives into an aerosol that can inhale through the mouthpiece. Vaping can cause breathing problems, organ damage, addiction, and other conditions. So when you look at the difference between vaping and smoking both involve inhaling nicotine and other substances in your lungs. E-cigarettes heats the liquid to make an aerosol, as well as cigarettes burn tobacco, which creates smoke. They all go into your lungs. But between the two, we don't know what is worse than the other, because pretty much they both involve many different chemicals that people really don't know about, as well as vaping hasn't been around long enough to know what kind of long-term damage it may cause. But if we're seeing young people who just maybe vape for a few years, going to the hospital and needing lung transplants, I can definitely will assure you that vaping will be considered more dangerous to tobacco use in the coming years. And one common misconception a lot of people have is that you're not vaping water vapor. It actually creates an aerosol or mist that contains small particles of nicotine, metal, and other harmful substances that people don't know, as well as we still trying to do research on the effects of. And in particular, what's in e-liquid or e-juice. E-liquid, also called e-juice or vape juice, is what vaping devices use to make vapor you breathe in. E-juice isn't just water, like I said. They usually contain flavoring, which is on sets ingredients, nicotine, harmful substances, cigarettes, and other products, propylene, glycerin used to create the vapor. There are other ingredients such as chemicals that can cause cancer, carcinogens like acetaldehyde and formaldehyde. Chemicals known to cause lung disease such as acrolein, diacylene, ethylene glycol, THC, the chemical marijuana that gets you high, get deep into your lungs and really affect the lining. And they have a host of many different risks and benefits, such as asthma, lung scarring, organ damage, EVALI, e-cigarette or vaping product use associated lung injury. They have their own specific, injury associated with e-vaping, addiction, cigarette smoking, secondhand exposure, explosions if the batteries, blow up, as well as, cancer, since some of them are carcinogenic. But when just looking at EVALI alone, EVALI is short for e-cigarette or vaping product use associated lung injury. It's a serious lung condition caused by vaping. Vitamin E acetate found in some e-liquids is a possible cause. They're still evaluating this. But an outbreak of EVALI in late 2019 and early 2020 put 1,000 people in the hospital. At least 268 people died. Since then, EVALI cases have been declining, but people who vape can still get EVALI. And so just looking at the research article, Association of Electronic Cigarette Use with the incidence of respiratory conditions among U.S. adults from 2013 and 2018. This is when vaping was, being in its prime. In this nationally representative cohort of 21,000 U.S. adults from the Population Assessment of Tobacco and Health Study, former and current use of e-cigarettes were associated with increased risk of developing a respiratory condition compared with no prior use of e-cigarettes independent of other tobacco products. So mainly, you're going to get an increased risk of e-cigarettes if that's all you use, even if that's all you use. 11,000 were men, 12,000 or 13,000 close to it were non-Hispanic white. A total of 14,000 respondents were never e-cigarette users. 5,000 respondents were former e-cigarette users, and 23,000 respondents were current e-cigarette users. Just for cigarette and other combustible tobacco product use, demographic characteristics, and chronic health conditions, there was an increased risk of respiratory disease among former e-cigarette users. Among respondents was good self-reported health, the IRR, the incidence rate ratio for former e-cigarette users was 1.21, which is, if you do that in percentage wise, that's like more than 100%, as well as the IRR for current e-cigarette users was 1.43, basically more than 100% still. And for specific respiratory diseases among current e-cigarette users, the IRR was 1.33 for chronic bronchitis, 1.69 for emphysema, 1.57 for COPD, and 1.31 for asthma. So definitely we're looking at these rates when it's above 1 or 1.00, basically, you're going to have an increased risk for, a certain disease, as well as if it's below 1.00, let's say like 0.30, it kind of shows that, you don't have an increased risk of this disease, or this is like a protective factor from you getting this disease in a way. So looking at these rates, yeah, definitely you have an increased risk, across the board, for e-cigarette users and, former e-cigarette users when you use a control group, which was people who never use e-cigarettes. And so just looking at the CDC page about this outbreak, as of February 18th, 2020, a total of 2,800 people were hospitalized for cases of EVALI. 68 people have unfortunately passed away in 29 states in the DC area, but emergency visits related to e-cigarette or vaping products continue to decline after sharply increasing in August of 2019 and peaking in September. Reasons for the decline are multifactorial, but they may be related to increased public awareness of the risks associated with THC containing e-cigarettes, vaping, or product use as a result of rapid public health response, removal of vitamin E acetate from some products, as well as law enforcement actions related to illicit products. One thing to note is that most of these cases were found out to be linked to informal sources of, getting these products, such as friends, family, or in-person or online dealers, such as like you getting like, you got your own dealer that you get your other illicit substance from, I'm not gonna say. And so that is what a lot of professionals kind of link to this outbreak, because like I said, vaping has been around for a long time, I think for the past 10 years, but it was so crazy to see such a sharp increase in cases like this. And so something illicit had to be going on pretty much with this one, as well as, it went with a sharp decline as more and more people became more aware of like these dangers of e-cigarettes. And so definitely that's something, we need to monitor on going forward, because e-cigarettes are ever more going to get popular unless we actually make legislation against them. In my personal opinion, I think we need to start doing with certain areas when we talk about tobacco laws, when we start like charging taxes on e-cigarettes, and putting that more into public health programming, as well as, you know, banning them in certain areas and certain populations, especially when you're under 18, since a lot of 18-year-olds can't really make a very much informed decision yet. And so that is something that we really need to highly consider when we talk about policy, because, you know, it's only going to get worse if we keep allowing it to get worse, especially after, you know, the big pandizzy, when mental health kind of went down and people started looking at other ways to cope. E-cigarettes definitely was one of those things that, you know, went back on a rise during that time, and so that's something we really need to mitigate. But with that being said, that has been Pop Health for today. If you like what you see today, like, subscribe, turn on post notifications, all that wonderful good stuff. If you want to see my last video I did on Tyler Olivier on Cancer Alley, not really just associated with vaping, but a lot of other different things when it comes to environmental health, please go watch that. But with that being said, stay warm, frosty, dry, cold, wet, depending on what part of the country you're in, and peace out.